Hey, just want to welcome you to the channel. If you've been here before, thanks for coming back. Really appreciate it. If you haven't been here before, take a look around. Check out the video section. There might be something in there that might interest you. Today we're going to be working on this 2014 Can-Am Commander 800. Little story to tell you. Went for a ride on the weekend and got about 30 to maybe 40 kilometers from home, and she overheated. Went into limp mode, low power mode, whatever you call it, get you home mode, get me the bush mode, whatever you want to call it. And turns out the cooling fan stopped working, so I got towed back. Cue the video. Anyway, so that's me getting towed back. It happens, I suppose. I can't find any other videos on cooling fan replacement on Can-Am Commander, so kind of excited to do this. I'll take you through step by step on how I diagnose it, how I make sure it's actually the cooling fan, what I decided to buy, not the OEM, give you a little hint there. We're going to try something a little different, and walk you through the process, and we'll just see if we can get this done. Who knows? Might end up worse off than it started. Things don't always go great here. If you watch my channel, you'll realize that real quickly, that I'm not always successful. But stick around. So, like most diagnoses start, we always start with checking for power in our fuses, looking for burnt fuse, whatever else. We're going to be using this test light with a ground right here. And we'll be hooking that up to this guy right here, because I know that's a good ground right there, like so. And then we remove this particular model's got the fuse panel inside. And after looking inside here, it was determined that this is the cooling fan relay slash fuse, I suppose. And we're going to check for power there. We have power. And on the other side, we have power. So I knew that this was good and this was not the problem. So then what I did is I went straight to the motor. So on this particular model, the 2014, the cooling fan is right back here. And it's part of this actual shroud from OEM. Here's the connector right here for the cooling fan. So we just pulled it off the top just by pushing down on this connector here. That unlatches it from the clip. And then what we did is we disconnected it like so. Just a little lever to lift up on there. And once we had it disconnected, this is the body side, is the female with the male plugs inside, or the male leads. And this is the fan side. So the first thing I did when I got home was I jumped the fan with this. So I applied ground to the black over here, as you can see, and I applied positive to the blue wire, and lo and behold, the fan kicks on. So right away I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it's not the fan, and not more than 30 seconds later, it got super hot and the fan quit. So we know it was the fan. I did have power here on this pin up here, so I knew that the switch was working on the motor and that the fan was getting command to turn on when it was hot. So that's how I diagnosed that it is most definitely the cooling fan motor. And not to mention the fact that when I put power here, it did quit working. So I'm not really quite sure how to get this out of here. I think I'm going to start by jacking the machine up. I'm going to remove the tire. I don't feel like draining coolant and dumping all that all over the place. So we're going to start by removing these little side covers and see what kind of access we can get from getting inside on both sides. And then we're going to come up on top here. We're going to remove this cover right here, and we're going to see if we can gain any access from there. Well, after a few minutes of playing with this, I did realize that I got a lot more room in the fender wells, so got one bolt off from the fender well. So let's continue in the fender wells. All right, all 4 bolts came out super easy. I think I'm going to be able to draw this out through the passenger side without taking the wheel off or anything. First thing I noticed though is that the connector for the fan is hooked up to one of the drain tubes, so we're going to cut that tie strap. It's not really a drain tube, I guess it's a more of a vent tube for the front diff or something. All right, so we got that cut. And as you can see, this thing is super loose. So I think I can push this out through the passenger side. So I'm going to go wiggle that for a couple minutes. I'm just going to turn this wheel, see if I can get a bit more room. And I just made sure that my my vent or my fan line was clear. Now, I don't know if this is going to come out of here or not. I would sure hate to have to disassemble the whole thing. Yeah, that looks pretty tight in there. So close. So close. What's preventing me from getting it out right now is the upper control arm bracket right here. So close. Even if I disconnect the rad without draining it, no, I honestly don't think there's any way of getting that out without removing the rad. So I'm just going to disconnect the air intake tube right here. And I'm going to try and pull that box up. I might have to take that box off, guys. Well, here's where we're at. So it's inevitable. I'm going to have to drain the rad. These little side covers are really cool. These come off super easy. They're just held on with little rubber plugs. Once I popped those off, I had all this room inside. So I disconnected the rad. There's just 2 bolts up on top there. Like I said, I disconnected my air line. But as you guys can see here, there is no way to pull it out. I don't want to damage anything. If I push this any further up against the actual winch there, I'm scared I might short it out on the power nut, short the rad out and maybe burn a hole in it. So I think the easiest thing to do is just pop the lower rad hose off right here. So I just put my vice grips on there to try and keep some of the coolant in the engine. Pop the other one off on the top. Rad should slide out without removing a wheel. We'll find out. And this is where we're at right now. I've only been at this for probably, I don't know, 30 minutes. All right, so we got the fan out. So we're just going to run down, recap. Just assume you're going to pull the rad because There's no way of squeezing that sucker out of there without doing it. Disconnected the lower rad hose on both sides, took out the 4 bolts of the shroud, took out the 2 top bolts of the actual rad, moved the shroud forward, unplugged it, the shroud being the fan, of course, and slid the rad out the side once I disconnected it. And once I had everything out, I put the rad back in and put the hose back on just so it didn't drip for hours. Anyway, another thing I want to thank you guys. 304 subscribers today. It's fantastic. It's been a year and I couldn't be more thrilled. Thank you so much for following along. So here's the fan we got. And this is the one we're going to attempt to put in. Like I said, I had read a couple blogs where some guys were using this and they said it was good. So the cooling fan is the Hayden, and the part number is 3680. So it looks like it's going to fit proper. So we'll put that aside. And here is the old fan right here. So I think what we're going to be doing is looking like we're going to be removing these bolts here from the fan. We're going to take the motor out, see how this comes apart, and how to put the other one in. Boo. So that is quite the heavy duty motor. That sucker is heavy. You can definitely feel that it got water intrusion in there. There's a part number from tri-pac. I'm not sure if you guys can see that or not. You can see that. That might be something to look for. So now we got that guy out. So here's our shroud. So we'll set this aside for a second. We'll set our blade aside for a second, and then we'll see what we can get done with this one here. Definitely much cheaper feel to it, that is for sure. But this was $79 as opposed to the $279 or $300 for the OEM. And if you notice, it doesn't come with the connector, but the wire colors are the same. So we will be reusing the wire connector from the old motor. This is the upward position here. That is almost a direct fit. And that fits really well. It is a little bit smaller than the OEM. So I guess my concern would be to center it properly. Now I'm just going to make note which way the OEM blade was facing. So it was like so, just to make sure my vanes are correct. So it just spins this way. And this one did have an arrow on it. And it spins this way as well. Oh, I may have just put that upside down. Hang on. What side was that on now? Let's just apply some power to the motor here quickly, and let's just see which way that spins. All right, so putting some power to it, this spins counterclockwise. So that's spinning counterclockwise. So if that's going to turn counterclockwise like so. I'm going to put the nut on it and go try it, that's all. All right, that is most definitely upside down. So what it's doing now is blowing this way, but we want it to actually pull through the rad, not blow into the rad. So that's an an nylon lock nut. Let's give that a shot. Well, that thing definitely zings. So there you go, that was a pretty easy install. So now we're just going to have to make sure we get these tie straps properly out of the way. This is the upper position where the clip goes up here. So we're going to be switching over this connector. And I am going to install these regardless because there is enough room on the edges there for some of the bolt to hold down the rim of the motor. All right, there we go. Looks good. All right, so I've gone ahead and I've cut the connector off the old motor and I'm going to braid these together. Save yourself a lot of aggravation and save yourself a lot of time by making sure that they're wired correctly and that you put your fan assembly on correctly, because this motor here, when the power is applied to the blue and the black, it rotates in a counterclockwise direction. So I made sure to note that would be the pull section. And then when I looked at the little tabs, I forgot to show you guys, there's little white pieces of paper on these guys here. The blue had the negative and the black had the positive. I'm not quite sure why. I reversed my fan so that it's going to be in the correct color codes, so that when I apply power this way, this fan is going to pull in. So save yourself some aggravation, making sure that the fan is turning the correct way and or that the blade is on the correct way that you need before you go ahead and solder this and stick it in, and then you realize that the sucker's pushing instead of pulling. So you don't want that to happen. So let's get these done.
installment actually went fairly well. You got lots of room in here. Now, one thing I did notice is that I'm going to say all the struggling I did at the beginning trying to get this fan shroud off prior to loosening the rad, I'm going to say take the 2 bolts off the top of the rad. That way there you have movement here. Once your top hose here is disconnected, then you have easy access to these bolts for that fan shroud. I tried to squeeze the unit in together, so I bolted the fan shroud on first with the rad, but there's just no room. Maybe if I had the tire off, I would have got it done, but super easy to do in here. And you notice I got my wire over here run, so I'm just going to make sure that we have a vent here for the diff, I believe it is. I'm going to make sure this is well secured and make sure that my wire isn't pinched anywhere, and then it comes through the proper channel and then comes back up here. So we're going to be tie strapping that to the shroud, and I think we're almost buttoning this up. So I'm just going to get this finished bolted back in. Only have 2 bolts on the top, and then I'm going to reassemble everything, get all this back together. This, for me, to have this loose like this was a must. I needed that, just that little extra room to be able to pull that out of there. So undo it, don't undo it. It's up to you. You can try without it. It's only 2 bolts right here, and that side, that pipe over there that I can't forget to put back on. Like I mentioned before, pulling this off, you do have to disassemble the inside, and or if you can somehow manhandle this thing to squeeze it through there and disconnect that back line, but I'm not going to do any of that. So let's get this thing back together. Well, we got her back together. Bleeding this thing is a real pain in the woohoo. I have never seen anything like it before in my life. Got everything buttoned up, no leaks, it's all good. You guys want to hear the fan? Nice and cool.
So there you have it. Hayden 3680 fan. Not a sponsored video. Put it in. That went really well. I'm very surprised. I had no really big issues. Hardest part was just figuring out how to get it out without a manual. That turned out that was super simple. I'm just going to break it down for you guys. You're going to take the rad out. There's no way of squeezing that out of there without it. Very, very simple. Get underneath, take your 2 side panels off, If you can get in, take the 2 top rad bolts off, push the rad forward, then you'll be able to reach the 4 shroud bolts. Those should come out no problem. Disconnect your little cooling fan motor, cut the tie straps to the vent, disconnect your upper and lower rad hose. I used clamps to pinch them off so that I didn't empty the whole engine block of fluid, because they're a real pain to bleed. And it first comes the rad, and then out came the fan motor, and as you saw on the bench, went really well to get it, apart and together. Making sure that you realize, or that you take note of which way that your fan is spinning prior to putting it in, because you'd hate to take it apart again. But bleeding the sucker was a pain in the butt, but that's all right. We're gonna get it. One thing I did notice, now and again, I'm not sure because it's taken me like an hour to bleed it with a ride, come back, let it cool, fill it up. I didn't want to take the little bleeder screws off on the engine, so it's running nice and cool now. As I'm driving on the road, it's 2 bars, 3 bars. It's perfect. Again, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe if you like what you see. Check out the other stuff on the rest of the channel. I have other Can-Am videos, and we'll see you guys next time. That was good. That was really good. That was a good video. Good job. Good job. Good job. Oh, I forgot to mention that if I can do it, anybody can. See you next time.